The crystal champagne flute felt cold in her hand, but not as cold as the public humiliation. Arya Sterling stood invisible at her own husband's side, watching him charm the woman he was blatantly having an affair with. He was a high-flying VP, and she was just his wife, a silent accessory he'd long since forgotten had a voice. But in 48 hours, the entire company, her cheating husband and his arrogant mistress, would learn a shocking lesson. The quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. They thought she was a nobody. They were about to find out she was everything. The grand ballroom at the Pierre Hotel was suffocating in the scent of gardenias and entitlement. Aperture Dynamics. A titan of the tech logistics world was celebrating its 25th anniversary. Men in bespoke tuxedos and women in liquid silk gowns circulated their laughter, sharp and brittle. Arya Sterling, wife of Marcus Sterling, the company's golden boy, VP of strategy, felt like a ghost. Her dress, a simple, elegant navy crepe, had cost more than most people's monthly rent. Yet in this room, it screamed invisibility. She watched her husband, Marcus. He was a lion, all charisma and polished teeth, holding court by the towering ice sculpture. And at his side, practically glued to his arm, was Chloe Thorne. Chloe was the company's new head of PR, a woman who looked like she was built in a lab, specifically to dazzle investors and infuriate wives. Her dress was a blinding sequin-red cut, so low it was a conversation starter and ender. Arya hadn't seen her husband in an hour, not since he'd deposited her by a sad-looking canapé tray with a murmured, "Mingle, Arya. Try to look engaged." Now he was laughing, his head tilted towards Chloe, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. It wasn't discreet. It wasn't even trying to be discreet. It was a statement. Arya felt the familiar cold knot tighten in her stomach. She'd known for months. The late nights, the emergency strategy sessions, the scent of Chloe's perfume, Santal 33, clinging to his shirts. But seeing it splayed out here under the glittering chandeliers for the entire company to witness was a new, sharper kind of pain. She took a step back, bumping into Jennifer, the wife of the CFO. Jennifer gave her a look that was a toxic cocktail of pity and judgment. "Arya, darling," Jennifer stage whispered, not bothering to lower her voice. "You're a saint. If my David ever looked at another woman like that, well, let's just say I wouldn't be standing here holding a shrimp." Arya forced a smile that felt like cracking porcelain. "Marcus is just welcoming the new PR head. He's very dedicated." Jennifer's eyes flickered back to the pair who were now sharing a champagne flute, Chloe sipping and giggling. "Oh, honey, he's dedicated all right." Arya mumbled an excuse and walked away, her heels sinking into the plush carpet. She found a shadowed alcove near the orchestra. The classical music was a thin veneer over the jungle sounds of the party. She watched as Marcus led Chloe onto the dance floor, his hands sliding down to her hips in a way that was anything but professional. This was her life. A beautiful empty penthouse on Park Avenue, a husband who treated her like furniture, and a social circle that watched her humiliation as if it were a spectator sport. Suddenly the music stopped. A man with a microphone was on stage tapping it. "If I could have your attention, we have a few words from the man who built this all, our esteemed CEO Harrison Vance." An older, distinguished man. Harrison Vance walked slowly to the podium. He looked tired. He was a legend, the man who'd started Aperture Dynamics in a garage and turned it into a global powerhouse. Arya watched him, She had a strange, distant connection to him, one she never spoke of, one no one knew. "Thank you all for coming." Harrison's voice boomed, then quieted with emotion. 25 years. It's been the ride of a lifetime. But all rides must come to an end. A nervous murmur rippled through the room. As many of you know, my health has presented challenges, and so it is with a heavy heart but great optimism for the future that I am announcing my retirement effective this Monday. The room erupted. Shocked gasps, frantic whispers. "Who's taking over? It has to be Markovitz from operations." "No, it's Sterling. Marcus Sterling. He's been groomed for it." Arya's eyes found Marcus on the dance floor. He was frozen, but a slow, predatory smile was spreading across his face. He looked at Chloe, and she looked at him, with dollar signs in her eyes. He thought this was it, his coronation. Harrison raised a hand. "The board has been in deliberations for weeks. My successor has been chosen. An official announcement will be made at a mandatory all-hands meeting Monday at 11 a.m. For now, enjoy the party." The music swelled back up, but the party's atmosphere had been shattered, replaced with a raw electric tension. Marcus, now buzzing with adrenaline, finally spotted Arya. He strode over, dragging Chloe by the hand. "Arya, did you hear? The old man is finally stepping down." His eyes were bright manic. "I heard," Arya said quietly. Chloe, emboldened by champagne and her new proximity to power, looked Arya up and down. "Oh, Arya, you're still here. I just love your dress. It's so sensible. Very you." She laughed, a sound like tiny breaking glass. Marcus chuckled a low, dismissive sound. Now, Chloe. Be nice. Arya's she's not into the corporate glamour, are you, honey? She's more domestic." He turned to Arya, his tone dropping to a growl. "Seriously, Arya, we're going to be in the spotlight. You need to try harder. This whole wallflower thing, it's embarrassing. Look at Chloe. This is what presence looks like." He didn't even see the flash of fire in Arya's eyes. He didn't see her hand tighten on the glass until her knuckles were white. He just saw what he'd always seen, the quiet, plain, unassuming wife. Arya took a slow, deep breath. She looked at Chloe's smug face, then at her husband's arrogant one. She gave them the smallest, most brittle of smiles. "You're right, Marcus," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Presence is everything." She turned and walked away, leaving them both standing there, surprised she'd even spoken. Marcus just shrugged, turning his attention back to Chloe. He had a kingdom to claim. He had no idea that the Queen had just silently declared war. Their penthouse was a glass box in the sky, with sweeping views of Central Park. It was decorated by a high-priced designer in shades of white, beige, and grey. It was beautiful, sterile, and cold. It was Arya's prison. She'd met Marcus 10 years ago. She was fresh out of college, quiet and bookish. He was a force of nature, a new MBA hire at Aperture Dynamics, who had future leader written all over him. He'd swept her off her feet, mistaking her quiet nature for simplicity, her introspective pauses for a lack of intelligence. Arya, for her part, had been charmed by his ambition. But she had a secret she'd kept buried for her entire adult life. She wasn't just Arya. She was Arya Vance, Harrison Vance's daughter. It was a fact Harrison himself had insisted on concealing. He was a private man, terrified of the world's focus on his only child, after his wife's death. He'd raised Arya away from the spotlight, sent her to quiet elite boarding schools under her mother's maiden name, Sterling, which she'd ironically kept. She'd met Marcus and never corrected his assumption that she was just Arya Sterling. She'd let him believe her family money was a small, dusty trust fund from a long-dead relative, not the controlling interest in a multi-billion-dollar global corporation. At first it was a game, then it became a trap. "What are you doing, Arya?" Marcus would ask, finding her reading a biography of Rockefeller. "Studying how to be rich, just leave that to me." "What's this?" He'd sneer, picking up a folder from her desk. It was her analysis of emerging markets in Southeast Asia. She'd quickly close it. Just a hobby. He had no idea. He had no idea that his domestic wife, his beige little wallflower, had graduated summa cum laude from Wharton with a dual degree in finance and international relations. He had no idea that the small inheritance she managed from her home office wasn't small at all. He had no idea that her charity work involved sitting on the boards of 3 major non-profits, managing endowments that dwarfed his own salary. He had no idea that Evie Holdings, the mysterious anonymous stakeholder with a 51% controlling interest in Aperture Dynamics, the very entity that had the power to install or destroy a CEO, was in fact her. Her father, Harrison, had structured it that way. He was the CEO, the face, but she held the true power, a dead man's switch, he'd called it, to protect his legacy. She'd been a silent partner content to let her father run the show content, to vote her proxy in alignment with his wishes. Until now. Now her marriage was a sham. Her husband was a philandering snake, and the company her father had built was about to be handed to him on a silver platter. She stood in her all-white office, overlooking the park. The gala was 3 days ago. Since then, Marcus had been unbearable. He was already operating as the unofficial CEO, taking meetings, promising promotions, and spending every evening celebrating with Chloe. He'd come home at 3 a.m. last night, reeking of Chloe's perfume and expensive scotch. He'd stumbled into the guest room, not even bothering to lie anymore. Arya sat at her desk. She opened her laptop, the screen reflecting her cold, determined expression. She logged into a secure portal, one that didn't exist on any Aperture server. She navigated to a folder labeled Contingency. Inside were files, audits, performance reviews, and a thick file labeled Sterling M. She'd been watching him for years, not as a wife, but as an owner. She'd seen every inflated expense report. She'd noted every strategic partnership that seemed to benefit his friends more than the company. She'd flagged his Project Chimera, a disastrous logistics platform he'd sunk $50 million into, which was now quietly bleeding the company dry. He wasn't just a bad husband. He was a bad employee. A liability. Her phone buzzed, a text from a private number. "Are you ready? H." It was her father. She typed a reply. "Yes. Call the board. 11 a.m. Monday." A moment later, another text. "He will be destroyed, Arya. Are you prepared for that?" Arya looked at her wedding photo on the wall. Marcus was smiling, but his eyes were already looking past her towards the next horizon, the next conquest. She remembered his words at the gala. "It's embarrassing." She typed her final reply. He built his own gallows. "I'm just pulling the lever. See you Monday, Dad." She shut the laptop. For the first time in 10 years, Arya Sterling didn't feel like a ghost. She felt like a storm, and the barometer was dropping fast. It was Saturday night, the calm before the storm. Monday's 11 a.m. meeting loomed over the entire company like a guillotine. Aria was in her walk-in closet, packing a single reinforced leather suitcase, not with clothes, with files, binders, hard drives. She heard the front door slam. Marcus was home early. That was new. "Aria!" he bellowed from the foyer. His voice was different. Not drunk, not arrogant. It was nervous. She walked out to the grand living room. He was pacing his tuxedo jacket from last night, still on tie ripped loose. "Where have you been?" he snapped. "I was here, Marcus, at home, where I always am." "Well, I've been calling you. Why didn't you pick up? My phone was on silent. I was reading." He ran his hands through his hair. Reading. "Do you have any idea what's happening? The old man just leaves no transition plan, no warning. And the board is silent. Arthur won't even take my call." Arthur Pendleton was the board chairman, an old money stalwart who had been Harrison Vance's right hand for 40 years. "I'm sure they're just handling the transition." "Marcus," Aria said, her voice even. "Handling it?" he scoffed. "This is my moment, Aria. My entire career has been building to this. I'm the obvious choice. I'm the only choice, but the silence, it's making me nervous." He finally stopped pacing and looked at her. Truly looked at her for the first time in months. And he didn't like the woman he saw. She wasn't wringing her hands. She wasn't fluttering anxiously. She was just watching him. "You know what?" he said, a new cold realization dawning on him. "You're part of the problem. Your passivity. I'm about to become CEO of a global company, and what will you be, this quiet mouse?" He walked over to the bar and poured a deep glass of Macallan 25. "This isn't going to work," he said, not looking at her. "What isn't?" Aria asked, though she already knew. "Us. This marriage." He took a long, burning sip. "Look, Aria, I'm going to be honest with you because I'm a good guy." Aria almost laughed. "A good guy." "I'm in love with Chloe," he said, as if announcing a new stock ticker. She gets me. She understands the pressure. She's a partner, not an anchor." He turned to her, his face a mask of false sincerity. "I'm filing for divorce." Aria stood perfectly still. "I see. Yeah, I figured you would. Look, I'm not a monster. I know you're not equipped for the real world. You have no job, no skills. You've just been living off me." This was the moment. The absolute breathtaking audacity of the man. He was telling her, a woman who controlled a multi-billion-dollar corporation, that she had no skills. So, he continued walking to his briefcase and pulling out a document. "I had my lawyer draw this up. It's a settlement. I'm being very, very generous. I'll give you the apartment. Well, not this apartment, obviously, but a nice one downtown, and a stipend. Enough for you to live on so you don't have to, I don't know, get a job as a barista." He slid the papers across the marble coffee table. "Just sign it, Aria. Let's make this clean. I need to be focused for Monday. A messy divorce. It's bad optics." Aria walked over to the table. She picked up the document. She saw the number. It was $2 million. A generous offer from a man whose last bonus, which she had technically approved, was $5 million. A man who had no idea that her personal portfolio, separate from Aperture, was worth over $900 million. He was offering her a rounding error. She looked at the signature line. Aria Sterling. And then she did something he never expected. She smiled, a real slow, cold smile. "What?" he said, unnerved. "What's so funny about this?" Arya said, holding up the papers. "It's very thorough, Marcus." "Of course it is. I had my best people on it," he said proudly. "I'm sure you did." She let the smile fade. "But I'm afraid I can't sign this." His face darkened. "Don't be stupid, Arya. You won't get a better offer. My lawyers will crucify you. They'll paint you as a depressed, unstable recluse, which, let's be honest, isn't far from the truth." Arya placed the document back on the table. "You'll get the papers, Marcus. Don't worry." "Good," he said, relieved. "I knew you'd see reason." "Oh no, not these papers," she said, her voice dropping, losing its soft, wife-like quality, and taking on a new hard corporate edge. "You'll be getting my papers from my lawyers." She picked up her leather suitcase from the floor. "What's in that?" he demanded. "My work," she said. "I'm going to the office. I have a rather big week ahead. The office, it's Saturday night." "What office, your little charity?" he sneered. Arya walked to the door. She paused her hand on the cold steel handle. "You're right about one thing, Marcus," she said, looking back at him. His face was a mask of confusion. This isn't going to work." She turned to him. "I suggest you get a very, very good lawyer, and I'd recommend updating your resume. I hear the job market is brutal." She opened the door and walked out, the click of the lock sliding into place behind her, echoing in the massive, silent apartment. Marcus was left alone, a glass of scotch in his hand, the divorce papers on the table, and the first sickening prickle of genuine fear dawning in his gut. Arya didn't go to a hotel. She went to the one place Marcus would never think to look for her, the executive penthouse suite at the Carlyle, which she kept under her EV Holdings corporate account. The moment she walked in, she was no longer Arya Sterling. She was Miss Vance. Waiting for her in the suite, seated around a mahogany table, were 3 people. Arthur Pendleton, the chairman of the board, a man in his late 70s, with eyes that had seen everything. David Chen, the head of Blackwood and Stone Apertures and her external counsel. And a woman she didn't know, who was introduced as Maria Gonzalez, the lead partner from PricewaterhouseCoopers, specializing in forensic accounting. "Arya," Arthur said, rising. He didn't hug her. He bowed his head. "It's time." "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Arya said, placing her leather case on the table and snapping it open. She was all business. "Harrison he's at his country estate resting," Arthur said. "He's watching, but he's made it clear. This is your ship to steer." "Good." Arya pulled out the first file. "Let's begin. Maria, welcome. You're new." Maria Gonzalez, sharp and no-nonsense, nodded. "Ms. Vance, your team called us in 72 hours ago. We've been busy. We started with the Project Chimera files you flagged." And, Maria said, sliding a tablet across the table. "It's not just a disaster, it's fraud. Your husband, Mr. Sterling, didn't just sink $50 million into a failed platform. He funneled $15 million of it through a series of shell companies, all registered in the Cayman Islands, all linked to a single holding company." "Let me guess," Arya said, her blood turning to ice. "Thorn Ventures." Maria's eyebrows shot up. "You knew. I've had my suspicions. Chloe Thorne's ambition is noteworthy. She wasn't just climbing the ladder. She was building an elevator." "It's worse than that," David Chen, the lawyer, cut in. "We've cross-referenced the wire transfers. They matched to the dollar the purchase of a $7 million condo in Miami and a $4 million villa in Lake Como. Both are held in a blind trust, but the beneficiary is Chloe Thorne. Arya leaned back. So, it wasn't just an affair. It was embezzlement. Grand-scale corporate theft. Marcus wasn't just cheating on her. He was cheating the company. Her company. He wasn't just building a nest egg, Arya said, connecting the dots. He was building an exit strategy. He and Chloe. They were going to sink the company cash out and disappear. He was, Arthur confirmed, his face grim. He was shorting Aperture stock through a third-party broker using the shell accounts as leverage. He knew Chimera would fail. He was planning on it. The more the company bled, the richer he and Ms. Thorne became. The room was silent. The sheer sociopathic scale of the betrayal hung in the air. And he thinks he's going to be named CEO, Arya said, a humorless laugh escaping her lips. The audacity. It's almost impressive. What's the plan, Arya? Arthur asked. We can have him arrested tonight. We can have the police meet him at the office Monday. It would be quiet, clean. Arya stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the glittering lights of Manhattan. Quiet, clean. After what he did to her, after what he'd planned to do to her father's legacy, no. He's right about one thing, Arya said, turning back to the group. Optics. A quiet arrest makes it look like we have something to hide. It spooks the market. It creates a vacuum. She looked at her team, her generals. No, we do this in the light. He wanted the spotlight. So we're going to give it to him. We'll give him the brightest, hottest, most unflinching spotlight he has ever seen. She walked back to the table. The 11 a.m. meeting is still on. Not a word of this leaks. Maria, I want your team at the office, 8 a.m. sharp, ready to seize all records from the strategy department. David, I want you to have the divorce papers and the termination for cause papers drawn up. And I want you to have restraining orders ready for both Mr. Sterling and Ms. Thorne, effective 11:01 a.m. And what happens at 11 a.m.? Arthur asked, a slow smile spreading on his face. He knew the answer. He'd been waiting for this day for 10 years. At 11 a.m., Arya said, her voice like steel. The primary stakeholder of EV Holdings formally dissolves her anonymity. At 11 a.m., Harrison Vance's successor is finally and publicly named. And at 11:01 a.m., I'm going to take out the trash. Monday, 9:00 a.m. The 60th floor executive wing of the Aperture Dynamics building was electric with a high, panicked hum. People were clustered around the high-tech espresso bars, whispering. It's Markovitz, has to be. No way. He's an operations guy. The board wants a visionary. It's Sterling. God, I hope not. The man's an arrogant pig. Yeah, but he's a profitable pig. Marcus Sterling's arrival was like a scene from a movie. The elevator doors dinged open, and he strode out, a king reclaiming his castle. He was wearing a new razor-sharp Zegna suit, a power tie in blood red, and a smile that was pure apex predator. At his side, like a loyal vicereine, was Chloe Thorne. She was in a stark white suit, her hair pulled back in a severe, powerful ponytail. They looked less like colleagues and more like a political power couple. Good morning, everyone, Marcus boomed, clapping a junior analyst on the back hard enough to make him spill his coffee. Big day. Big changes, the future is now. He and Chloe didn't walk to their offices. They walked past them straight to the massive glass-walled corner office, the one that had Harrison Vance, CEO, on a simple gold plaque. "Marcus, you can't." His assistant, and trembling, tried to stop him. "It's fine, Sarah," Chloe cooed, already admiring the view. "We're just measuring the drapes." Marcus laughed and sat in Harrison's chair, putting his feet up on the massive oak desk. "Fits like a glove, doesn't it?" The entire floor was watching, horrified and fascinated. This was a level of hubris that was legendary. Meanwhile, on the 59th floor in the strategy department, a different scene was unfolding. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, a team of 20 stone-faced accountants from PricewaterhouseCoopers, led by Maria Gonzalez, had walked in. They hadn't asked for permission. They'd presented a letter from the board and immediately began boxing up servers, seizing laptops, and ordering everyone out. Marcus's phone had been blowing up. "Sir, there are people in here. They're taking our computers." "What do you mean, taking them? Tell them to get out. They have a letter from Mr. Pendleton." Marcus, still in the CEO's office, had waved it off. "It's just the old man's last-minute paranoia. An audit. Don't worry about it. Tell them to audit. It'll make us look clean." He'd hung up and turned to Chloe. "We need to handle this. Once I'm announced, my first act will be to fire that entire department. Redundancies. We'll move the real strategy to our offshore team." He'd winked. At 10:45 a.m., a company-wide email went out. The 11 a.m. all-hands meeting will be held in the 20th floor Grand Auditorium. Attendance is mandatory. No exceptions. Marcus and Chloe took the private executive elevator down. They walked into the auditorium and, in a breathtaking display of confidence, sat in the 2 seats in the very front row, right in the center. Reserved seats which they'd simply taken. The room was packed. Hundreds of employees, from mailroom clerks to VPs, were crammed in, shoulder to shoulder. The air was thick with anticipation. Marcus leaned over to Chloe. "Look at them. They're terrified." "Good. A little fear keeps them productive." "You're going to be amazing, darling," she whispered back, squeezing his hand. "When this is over, we're flying to Como." At 10:59 a.m., the lights in the auditorium dimmed. A single spotlight hit the podium. The side door opened. Arthur Pendleton, the chairman, walked out. He looked solemn. "Good morning, everyone." Arthur began, his voice echoing in the silence. "This is a momentous day. A day of transition." He spoke for 5 minutes, eulogizing Harrison Vance's career. He talked about legacy, about the future, about the soul of the company. In the front row, Marcus was checking his watch. "Get on with it, old man." "As you know," Arthur continued, "Harrison's retirement, while planned, was accelerated. But he and the board have been in long-term discussions about his successor. The decision was not easy. The person to lead Aperture into the next quarter-century needed to be unique." Marcus preened. He straightened his tie. "Unique. That's me." This person couldn't just know the business. They had to be the business. Someone with an unparalleled, intimate knowledge of our operations, our finances, and our people. Someone with a deep, personal vested interest in our success. Vested interest. Marcus's smile widened. He had millions in stock options. The board's vote was unanimous on the recommendation of the company's primary, and until now, anonymous stakeholder EV Holdings. A gasp went through the crowd. EV Holdings was a ghost story, a corporate legend, the shadow owner no one had ever seen. "And so," Arthur said, It is my profound honor to introduce you to the new CEO and President of Aperture Dynamics. This was it. Marcus half stood, ready to accept the applause. Chloe was already beaming. Who has graciously agreed to step out of the shadows and take her rightful place at the helm of this company. Marcus froze. Her Arthur turned to the side of the stage. Please welcome your new CEO, Aria Vance Sterling. The name hung in the air, electric and confusing. Aria Vance Sterling. For a full 5 seconds there was absolute stunned silence. The crowd was confused. Sterling-like. Marcus Sterling. His wife. The quiet, mousy woman from the Christmas parties. It had to be a joke. Marcus Sterling's face was a grotesque painting of confusion. He looked at Arthur, then at Chloe, then back at the stage, a half laugh, half gasp stuck in his throat. "What did he say?" he whispered. Chloe's face was white. He said Aria, and then from the same side door Arthur had used, she appeared. The woman who walked onto the stage was not the Aria Sterling they knew. The ghost was gone. This woman was solid, and she was terrifying. She was not in a sensible dress. She was wearing a bespoke midnight blue Armani power suit pants, so sharply creased they could cut glass. Her hair, usually in a soft, simple bun, was down, sleek and straight, falling like a sheet of dark silk. Her makeup was minimal but flawless, and her eyes, once downcast and soft, were now sharp-focused and utterly cold. She walked to the center of the stage, not with a wife's hesitant step, but with a CEO's ground-eating, confident stride. The click of her black Louboutin heels on the stage was the only sound in the massive room. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She walked straight to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of faces. And then her eyes found him. She stared down at the front row, at her husband, Marcus. He was standing now, his mouth half open, his face contorted in a rictus of disbelief and horror. He looked like he'd been struck by lightning. "Aria," he croaked, loud enough for the first few rows to hear. What is this? What are you doing?" Aria's gaze was unwavering. She held his eyes for a 5-second-long execution. She didn't acknowledge his question. She just looked at him. And in that look, he saw it all. The gala. The sensible dress. The sneers. The humiliation. The generous divorce offer. He saw the woman he had dismissed, mocked and cheated on. And he saw for the first time who she truly was. She broke eye contact with him and turned her attention to the rest of the company. "Good morning," she said. Her voice. It wasn't the whisper he was used to. It was clear, deep, and resonated with an authority that filled the room. It was the voice of command. "My name is Aria Vance Sterling. Vance, as in Harrison Vance. He is my father. Sterling, as in... Well, we'll get to that." A new, more violent wave of shock rippled through the room. His daughter. The daughter. All this time. "For 25 years, Aria continued, her voice cutting through the noise. "My father built this company from nothing. For the last 10, I have been its primary stakeholder. Holdings. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. I have watched from a unique vantage point as this company has grown. I've seen its triumphs, and I have seen its vulnerabilities. I've stayed killant, as was my father's wish. But as of 9 a.m. this morning, the board has unanimously voted me in as the new CEO, and my silence is over. She gripped the edges of the podium. My father's legacy was one of integrity. My legacy will be one of accountability. She looked at Marcus again, who had sunk back into his chair, his skin the color of ash. Aperture Dynamics is a brilliant company, but it has been infected. It is suffering from a sickness of arrogance, waste, and a lack of ethical oversight. That sickness ends today. My first order of business, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous level, is an immediate and full-scale forensic audit of all executive departments, starting with the strategy division. From the back of the room, several people gasped. That was Marcus's kingdom. We have irregularities, Arya said, letting the word hang in the air. Irregularities in Project Chimera. Irregularities in offshore partnerships. Irregularities that a team from PricewaterhouseCoopers, who are currently on the 59th floor, are uncovering as we speak. Now all eyes turned to Marcus. He was sweating his new Zegna suit, suddenly looking like a coffin. And then Arya's eyes moved slowly, deliberately, to the woman sitting next to him. Second, Arya said, we will be implementing a new zero-tolerance ethics policy. Our company will no longer tolerate fraternization that compromises our bottom line. We will not tolerate employees who use their position for personal enrichment at the expense of our shareholders. Chloe Thorne, who had been frozen in a state of "this isn't happening," suddenly felt the heat of 1,000-sun spotlight. She looked like a trapped animal. Marcus finally found his voice. It was a pathetic, broken thing. Arya. Honey. Stop. What is this? This is a joke, right? You're sick. The pressure, it's made you snap. He started to stand up, to walk towards the stage, a desperate, placating smile on his face. Everyone, my wife, she's unwell. Sit. Down, Arya commanded. The voice was so sharp, so powerful, that Marcus froze 1 foot in the aisle. Do not call me honey, she seethed the microphone, picking up every venomous syllable. Do not call me your wife, and do not ever insinuate I am unwell. You, Mr. Sterling, are in no position to speak. Not to me, not to anyone. She nodded to the side of the room. Security. 2 large men in black suits who had been standing unnoticed by the exits began to walk calmly but with grim purpose down the center aisle. They were not the usual Aperture security guards. They were a private team. Marcus's false placating smile vanished, replaced by a raw, primal panic. Arya, you can't do this. This is my company. I built the strategy division. You're a housewife, he roared, his voice cracking. The entire auditorium recoiled. The insult was so base, so pathetic, it hung in the air like a foul smell. Arya simply watched him, her expression unreadable. She let his words echo. She let every single employee hear what their leader truly thought. A housewife, Arya repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. This housewife has a Wharton MBA, summa cum laude. This housewife has been managing a $900 million private equity fund for the last 10 years. And this housewife owns 51% of your salary, your bonus, and the chair you're currently sweating in. She turned to the 2 security guards who had now reached the front row. Mr. Sterling's access is revoked. His corporate accounts are frozen. His permissions are nullified. He is to be escorted from the building, immediately. No, Marcus yelled, trying to back away. You can't, I'm the CEO. I'm the CEO. The guards didn't hesitate. One took his left arm, the other his right, and they lifted him from his seat with practiced, non-negotiable force. "Arya, you bitch!" he screamed, his polished veneer finally shattering, revealing the rotten, desperate man beneath. "You'll pay for this. I'll ruin you. You'll what, Marcus?" Arya asked, her voice projecting over his shouts. "You'll crucify me. You'll paint me as an unstable recluse. You'll offer me a generous settlement. I think you've done enough." His eyes went wide with true, bottomless terror. He realized she'd known. She'd known everything. As they dragged him past the podium, he made one last, desperate lunge. "Chloe, tell them it's a mistake." All eyes, including Arya's, swiveled to Chloe Thorne. Chloe was hyperventilating. She was trapped. She looked at the screaming, pathetic man being dragged away, and she looked at the silent, all-powerful woman on the stage. She made her choice. I don't know him," Chloe stammered, shrinking in her seat. I just worked for him. He forced me. He said if I didn't, he'd fire me." It was a good performance, but Arya was the director. "A compelling story, Miss Thorne," Arya said, her voice dripping with ice. "Unfortunately, I've already read the script and the bank transfers." Chloe's head snapped up, her eyes wide with animal panic. The $7 million condo in Miami, the $4 million villa in Lake Como, all purchased with funds embezzled from Project Chimera, Arya stated as calmly as if reading a weather report. "You weren't his victim, Chloe. You were his co-conspirator." Arya nodded to the other side of the room, where two uniformed NYPD officers, accompanied by David Chen, the lawyer, were now walking towards Chloe. "Marcus Sterling is a corporate matter," Arya announced to the room. "Theft, embezzlement, and wire fraud. That is a criminal one." Chloe let out a small, strangled sound as the officers reached her. "Chloe Thorne," one of the officers said, his voice flat. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and grand larceny." Chloe didn't scream like Marcus. She just deflated. The sobs that racked her body were silent. Her hands held out for the cuffs as if in a daze. The click of the handcuffs was as loud as a gunshot in the silent room. As they led her away, a single document fluttered from her designer handbag. It was a printout. Flight confirmations. JFK to FCO Rome. 2 passengers. First class. 1 way. Departing 7:00 p.m. Today. Arya looked at it, then back at the stunned, silent, terrified crowd. "As I said," she said, her voice ringing with finality. Accountability. For a long moment, the auditorium was a vacuum. The only sound was the distant whine of a police siren fading on the street below, and the quiet, collective hum of the air conditioning. Hundreds of people sat frozen, processing the brutal surgical execution they had just witnessed. 2 of the most powerful, glamorous, and feared people in the company had been erased. Not just fired, but vaporized. One dragged out by security, screaming like a madman. The other led away in handcuffs, a criminal. The VPs in the 2nd and 3rd rows, Marcus's men, his inner circle, looked at each other with pale, sickened expressions. They were the ones who had laughed at his jokes, covered his meetings with Chloe, and benefited from his corrupt projects. They were terrified. They were next. Arya stood at the podium, a general surveying the scorched earth of the battlefield. The victory was absolute. She took a slow, deep breath. The adrenaline from the confrontation began to recede, and her entire demeanor shifted. The avenging ice of her anger didn't disappear, but it refroze into something new, a white-hot, focused and purposeful fire. She wasn't just a destroyer. She was a builder. "I know," she said, and her voice, now reasonable and human, cut through the thick, fearful silence. "That was shocking. I take no pleasure in what you just had to witness. But a sickness like that, it can't be negotiated with. It can't be phased out. It has to be cut out cleanly and completely, so the healing can begin." She looked at the faces row by row. "The infection is gone. And now," she said, her voice hardening with resolve, "the real work begins." She clicked a remote in her hand. The large screen behind her, which had been dark, flared to life. It wasn't a spreadsheet of the losses. It wasn't a stock ticker. It was a new logo. The same Aperture A, but cleaner, stronger stripped of the gaudy, polished chrome Marcus had added. Aperture Dynamics was built on one thing: innovation. But somewhere along the way, we started chasing the appearance of success instead of success itself. We rewarded arrogance, not results. We valued charisma over character. "That era," she said with utter finality, "is over." She started to pace the stage, and her energy no longer coiled, and dangerous began to fill the room, pulling people in. "Starting today, we are a new company. We are a company that values integrity. We are a company that values transparency. And we are a company that values talent, no matter where we find it, or how long it has been ignored." Her eyes scanned the crowd, and this time they weren't searching for enemies. They were searching for allies. Jennifer Miller from Accounts Payable, please stand up." In the third row, a woman with a mousy brown ponytail, who looked like she wanted to slide under her chair, stood up, trembling. "2 years ago, Ms. Miller," Aria said, her voice projecting, "you sent an email to the strategy department, warning that the billing from Project Chimera's consultants was irregular and potentially fraudulent. You were told, and I quote, to stop being a nosy bookkeeper and just pay the bills. You were right. You were ignored." Aria smiled, a small, fierce smile. "As of 12:30 p.m. today, you are the new head of internal auditing. You have a new expanded team, a blank check budget, and you answer directly to me. Go be nosy." Jennifer Miller's jaw dropped. The entire auditorium, after a beat of stunned silence, erupted in spontaneous, genuine applause. It started with the junior staff and spread, forcing even the nervous VPs to join in. Aria held up a hand. She wasn't done. "David Kim in R&D. She pointed to another corner. "Please stand." A man with glasses and a famously rumpled shirt stood up. "Your vanity project for drone-based automated logistics, the one Mr. Sterling defunded because it lacked immediate glamour. It's no longer a vanity project. It's now our company's top priority. You have a $100 million budget effective immediately. Make it happen." More stunned, excited applause. This was not a purge. This was a restoration. "And one more thing," Aria said, her voice turning serious. "The Executive Discretionary Fund and the Golden Boy bonus pool, which Mr. Sterling used to reward his inner circle, are hereby dissolved. That money is being immediately reallocated. Half will go to R&D. The other half is going into 401k matching and across-the-board cost of living raises for every single employee from the mailroom to the 50th floor." That set the room ablaze. The fear was gone, replaced by a wild electric hope. She wasn't just a shark. She was a shark who knew everything. She hadn't just been watching her husband. She'd been watching all of them. She knew who the workers were and who the parasites were. For 20 minutes, she laid out a new vision. A company that didn't just win, but deserved to win. When she finished, she looked out at the crowd. They weren't scared. They were electrified. They were hopeful. For the first time in years, they were inspired. "What I've just laid out is a promise," Arya said, returning to the podium. The adrenaline was fading, and she felt the first deep tremor of the immense weight she had just shouldered. "I am not my father. I will not be a silent partner watching from the shadows. I will be here with you every single day. We have a lot of work to do. We have a reputation to rebuild. We have a company to save." She looked at them, a powerful, determined, and finally free woman. "Thank you for your time. Welcome to the new Aperture Dynamics. Now let's get to work." The room exploded. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar. A standing ovation that was part relief, part admiration, and part pure, unadulterated adrenaline. People were cheering, crying, hugging. Arya smiled, a small, genuine, and slightly tired smile. She nodded, turned, and walked off the stage. In the wings, her lawyer David Chen was waiting. He was no longer with Arthur Pendleton, who was now on stage shaking hands and calming the excited crowd. "Ms. Vance Sterling," David said, handing her a tablet. "You are trending." On the screen was a news alert. "Marcus Sterling, Aperture VP, arrested in shocking ouster. Chloe Thorne, arrested for fraud. And another one from her private divorce attorney, Mr. Sterling, has been served. He's contesting the prenup." Arya let out a short, sharp laugh. "The prenup he insisted on. The one that says he gets nothing if he cheats. Let him contest. He's a good guy, after all. His lawyers can speak to my lawyers." David smiled. "And this." He pointed to an incoming text on her phone. She picked it up. One new message. "That's my girl. Dinner on Sunday. You're buying. H." She smiled and put the phone away. "My father is enjoying his retirement." She turned from the chaos of the auditorium and walked toward the private executive elevator. The one that for the past decade she had never been allowed to use. As she approached her reflection, moved across the polished marble wall, she didn't see the humiliated wife from the gala. She didn't see the sensible woman in the navy dress. She saw a CEO. She pressed the button for the 60th floor. Her floor. The humiliation was over. The reign had just begun. And just like that, the empire built on arrogance crumbled at the feet of the woman they never saw coming. Arya's story is a powerful reminder that silent endurance is not weakness. It is the quiet gathering of strength. The world is full of people like Marcus and Chloe who mistake kindness for fragility and silence for stupidity. But karma, as they say, always has a way of balancing the books, and sometimes it does so in a public auditorium with a microphone. What did you think of Arya's ultimate power move? Was it pure justice or cold revenge? What would you have done in her position? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of justice and vindication, make sure to hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama stories every single week. You won't want to miss what's coming next.